Ngozi had always been a quiet girl. She didn't talk much, didn't dress flashy, and stayed to herself. After her father died, she moved to the city to find work, hoping for a fresh start. She rented a tiny room in a compound owned by two loud sisters who acted like queens just because they owned property. For months, Ngozi tried to keep up with rent, selling food on the street during the day and sewing clothes at night. But one bad month turned into two, and the sisters had no mercy. One hot afternoon, they stormed into her room, shouting and dragging her things outside. "You think this is charity?" they yelled, while neighbors gathered to watch. Clothes, bags, even her little mattress, all dumped in the middle of the street. Ngozi stood frozen, tears slipping down her cheeks, her clothes clinging to her as the wind played cruel games. Some people laughed, others brought out their phones to record. No one helped. That day, shame swallowed her whole. But Ngozi didn't fight back. She didn't curse anyone. She simply picked up her things and walked away. She slept on a friend's floor that night, and from that moment, she promised herself she would never beg anyone for space again. She started working like her life depended on it. Selling food turned into catering. A customer connected her to events. She began saving. Her business grew. She opened a small restaurant, then another. People began calling her Madam N. Still, she said nothing. She stayed quiet. She stayed focused. Exactly 1 year later, that same compound went up for sale. The sisters had run into debt, trouble with the bank. A silent buyer came forward and paid in cash. The papers were signed. No fuss. It wasn't until the sisters were asked to vacate the rooms they once ruled over that they saw her, Ngozi, standing by the gate, calm, beautiful, powerful. "You," one of them whispered. Ngozi didn't smile. She simply handed them their eviction notice, turned, and walked into her building. From shame to power, she didn't shout. She didn't take revenge. She simply rose. When Chiamaka first arrived at the old student lodge with nothing but her worn-out blue trunk, people laughed behind her back. She was shy, soft-spoken, and wore long skirts and rubber slippers. Most of the girls in the lodge wore wigs, makeup, and expensive jeans. Compared to them, Chiamaka looked like someone straight from the village. They called her the girl with the blue box. They rolled their eyes when she greeted them. They made fun of how she boiled her water with a coil, how she prayed out loud, how she never went to parties. She tried to fit in, tried to be kind, but the judgment never stopped. Then 1 month, her payment for a freelance online job delayed. She couldn't pay rent on time. She begged the caretaker to give her a few more days, but the girls in the lodge had already decided she didn't belong. One afternoon, when she returned from internet cafe, she found her clothes and her blue trunk thrown out in the sun, her panties scattered, her notebooks soaked from water someone had poured. The girls stood nearby, laughing like it was funny. Chiamaka didn't say a word. She picked up her things, hugged her trunk to her chest, and left. For the next 2 years, Chiamaka disappeared from their world, but she was not idle. She got a remote tech job online, worked day and night, taught herself graphic design and social media skills. One opportunity led to another. She got a scholarship and moved to America for a 1-year digital marketing program. She changed. She grew, but she never forgot. 2 years later, a black Jeep pulled up in front of that same lodge. A tall, confident woman stepped out, sunglasses on, lace dress flowing, with red heels clicking against the pavement. No one recognized her at first, until she smiled. It was Chiamaka. She wasn't there to visit. She was there to buy. The property had gone up for sale. Quietly, without fanfare, she bought it in full cash. No loans, no noise. And when the documents were signed, the first thing she did was change the signboard outside. It no longer read Greenhill Lodge. Now it said Chia Palace, bold gold letters shining under the sun. That same blue trunk? She kept it in her new office, as a reminder of where she started. Alera was just 30 when her husband died. 1 minute they were planning their future. The next, she was standing alone, holding her 3 little children with no one to turn to. Her in-laws didn't want her around. "You're still young, go back to your people," they said. But she had nowhere to go. So she moved into a tiny room in an old compound at the edge of town. 1 mattress on the floor, 1 stove, and all 4 of them squeezed in. The neighbors whispered. "She's finished," they said. 3 children and no husband. She'll never make it. Some even laughed when they saw her washing clothes for people or picking soap scraps from the market. But Alero didn't care. Every day, she would walk long distances just to find work. At night, she would cry quietly so her children wouldn't hear. She didn't ask anyone for help. All she had was a small book of recipes her grandmother left behind, and one of those recipes was for handmade soap. She started with small batches, mixing and cutting soap on her veranda. She gave some to neighbors for free, hoping they would spread the word. Slowly, they did. Her soap smelled good, made skin soft, and people started asking for more. She gave her brand a name, Alero's Touch. She posted pictures on Facebook, then TikTok. One video of her mixing soap in a big basin while her baby slept on her back went viral. Orders started flying in, not just from town, but from other cities. Within a year, Alero was making real money. She got a small team, then a delivery. She opened a little store. When the landlord of her old compound ran into debt and put the property up for sale, Alero didn't think twice. She paid double the price, in full. No loan, no delay. The same neighbors who once laughed at her were now her tenants. Some called her Madam, others Ma. She never rubbed it in. She simply smiled and continued her business. Now, her children play in the courtyard freely, and when people talk about her, they say, "That woman is strong. That woman is blessed. She went from a widow they mocked to a woman they now respect." Isioma was different from the other girls in the hostel. She didn't wear makeup, didn't use iPhones, and didn't care about Instagram likes. She wore simple clothes, carried a big old bag that looked like it had everything she owned, and always spoke with a deep village accent. The other girls called her baggage behind her back, sometimes even to her face. They laughed at her, mocked her food, and made her feel like she didn't belong. But Isioma was focused. She wasn't in the city to impress anyone. She was in school, studying computer science and teaching herself coding at night from YouTube and free websites. She didn't party. She didn't gossip, she just worked. Still, one day when her parents delayed her hostel fees, the caretaker knocked on her door and told her to leave. Some of the hostel girls were quick to celebrate. Finally, they said, baggage is going home. Her clothes were thrown out, her books were tossed into the mud. She stood there holding her laptop and that old bag, trying not to cry. People watched from their balconies. Some filmed it. Nobody helped. But Isioma walked away with her head high. She moved into a small church office and lived there for months. She kept learning. She built a mobile app for a local market, then got hired remotely. One job turned into two. Then came her own startup, a women-focused fintech company. She got invited to conferences, featured in magazines. The girl they once called Baggage was now the CEO of a rising tech company. 3 years later, that same hostel building went into auction. The owners were in debt. Many bidders came, but the highest bid came from a private buyer, a woman. It was Isioma. When the papers were signed, she didn't call a press conference. She just walked into the compound quietly, wearing a crisp suit and heels. The same girls who once mocked her were shocked. Some were still living there, now jobless, rent due. One by one, they came to her. "Can you reduce the rent for us?" they asked. Isioma smiled gently and said, "You used to call me Baggage, but now you'll be paying me rent." The hostel got a new name, Baggage House, not in shame, but in pride. A reminder that sometimes the one you throw away is the one who will own everything. Funke was just a quiet tailor trying to survive. She worked in a small roadside shop and lived in a one-room apartment at the back of her landlord's compound. She wasn't flashy, didn't have much, but she minded her business and paid her rent on time. One day, the landlord's daughter brought in some expensive lace clothes and told Funk to iron them perfectly. Funk did her best, but the electricity kept going off, and the iron burned one corner slightly. The girl screamed like her whole life was ruined. That evening, the landlord and his entire family gathered and shouted at Funke, "You're useless! You don't deserve to live here." They didn't listen to her explanation. Neighbors came out to watch. Some laughed, some recorded with their phones. Funk's clothes, mattress, sewing machine, everything was thrown outside like trash. She stood there humiliated, dust on her face, eyes full of tears. She didn't scream, she didn't fight. She just picked up her things and left. But that moment changed everything for her. She moved in with a friend in another town and started over. She saved every naira she could. She worked longer hours, took night classes to improve her sewing. Eventually, she met a customer who helped her get a fashion job in Dubai. From there, Funk's world opened. She learned new styles, opened her own boutique, started training others, and became a known designer in the Nigerian community abroad. 5 years passed. When she returned to Nigeria, she came quietly. No noise, no announcement. The same building where they had once humiliated her was now up for sale. The landlord had fallen into financial problems. People were bidding, but Funk offered full payment, in cash. The papers were signed. She became the new owner. The landlord and his family still lived there, unaware. When they were handed notice and saw Funke at the gate, their mouths fell open. "You," the landlord's wife whispered. Funke looked at them, calm and graceful, and simply said, "Yes, me." She didn't shout. She didn't take revenge, but she made one change. She turned her old room into a small free sewing school for young girls like her. The same building where she was broken now had her name on the deed. Adaobi was a struggling makeup artist, just trying to survive in a big, noisy city. She had dreams, talent, and hope, but not enough money. She lived in a tiny room at the back of an old compound, barely making enough from her few clients to cover rent and food. Some days, she skipped meals just to save for makeup products. Still, she stayed focused, always believing that one day things would change. But one rainy afternoon, everything came crashing down. She was a week late on rent. The landlord, a harsh man with no patience, didn't want to hear any excuse. While Adaobi was out trying to get a client, he broke the lock, dragged her things out, and left them in the open, under pouring rain. Her clothes were soaked, her mattress ruined, her makeup kits destroyed. Neighbors watched, some feeling sorry, some just watching for drama. When Adaobi returned and saw her belongings lying in the mud, she didn't cry, she didn't scream. She quietly picked up her phone, wiped her face, took a selfie with the mess behind her, and posted it online with a short caption, "Remember this moment." Then she left. From that day, Adaobi worked like never before. She started making short makeup tutorials with borrowed products and cheap lighting. Her honesty, her pain, her raw energy, people felt it. One video went viral, then another. Brands noticed, followers grew. She got her first sponsorship, then bookings, then features in beauty magazines. In just 2 years, Adaobi became one of the most loved beauty influencers in the country. And then came the day that changed everything. The same landlord's compound went up for sale. He had gotten into debt, couldn't maintain the place, and wanted to sell fast. Buyers came, agents talked, but one buyer offered triple the market value, just to seal the deal immediately. It was Adaobi. She didn't come with noise. She arrived in a black Prado Jeep, sunglasses on, her assistant beside her. When she stepped out, the landlord looked confused, and then terrified. "You?" he asked. She smiled. "Yes, me. I told you to remember that moment." Now, the woman who once had her life thrown into the mud was the one who owned the very ground they stood on. And her selfie? It's now framed in her office, proof of how far she came. Temilola had nothing but a dream and a small bag when she came to the city for school. She stayed in a cheap student lodge, sharing a room with 2 other girls. She didn't complain. She just wanted to finish school and build a better life. But the other girls didn't like her quiet ways. They said she was too plain, too serious, too broke. One month, she couldn't pay her share of the rent on time. Her father had fallen sick, and every kobo she had went into sending money home. Instead of helping or even being patient, her roommates reported her to the caretaker. Without warning, they packed her things and threw them outside like garbage. People gathered to watch. Some laughed. "She doesn't even have a box," someone whispered. "She's just a burden." Temilola stood there in silence, her eyes burning, heart shaking. But she didn't break. With nowhere else to go, she begged a woman who owned a small shop nearby. The woman allowed her to sleep in the storeroom behind the shop. No bed, no light, no fan. Just cement floor and cardboard boxes. Temilola slept there for months. No kitchen, no water, just her hunger, and her dream. Then one day she borrowed a small gas stove and baked a cake using an old family recipe. She took a picture, posted it online, and offered to deliver for free. 1 order came, then 5, then 20. Her cakes were soft, beautiful, different. People started sharing her work. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She named her brand Sweet Lola Cakes and turned that storeroom into a mini bakery. Within a year, she was making serious money. She moved out, hired staff, opened a real shop and started teaching online classes. Her story went viral. The girl who rose from a storeroom. Investors reached out. Clients booked from across states. 2 years later, that same street where people once mocked her, she started buying it. Building by building, plot by plot. Quietly, powerfully. Now she owns almost the whole street. The same people who once called her a joke now pay her rent. Even the lodge that kicked her out. She bought it and turned it into a bakery training school for girls like her. She once slept on the cold floor in the back of a shop. Today, Temalola owns the block. Every morning, the soft tack-tack-tack sound of Zawadi's sewing machine filled the old building. She lived in a small room at the back, always bent over fabric, stitching clothes with quiet focus. While others were sleeping, partying, or gossiping, Zawadi was sewing. But the tenants in the building didn't respect her. They said she was too local, called her the noisemaker, and laughed at her simple dresses and calloused hands. She thinks she's a fashion designer, one girl mocked. She's just a tailor. No one spoke to her with kindness. Some covered their ears dramatically when she worked. Others told the caretaker to evict her. And then one day, they all ganged up. They complained her sewing machine was disturbing their peace. Without warning, her things were thrown outside. Her clothes, threads, needles, even the machine that helped her survive. Zawadi stood outside, her belongings scattered under the sun. People passed by. Some pitied her, others chuckled, but she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just packed what she could and walked away. From that day, Zawadi focused harder. She moved into a corner shop and stitched from morning to night. Slowly, people started noticing her talent. Orders came, then referrals, then wedding clients. Zawadi upgraded her designs, her branding, her packaging. She opened a boutique, then another. Her name started trending on social media. Zawadi Designs. Years passed. One morning, the same old building where they had mocked her went up for sale. The owner needed money fast. People came with offers, but one woman came with cash. No loan, no delay. It was Zawadi. When the sale was completed, she didn't make a scene. She simply had notices printed and handed them to each tenant. New rent terms, new rules, new owner. The tenants who once mocked her were stunned. One even asked, "Zawadi, is this a joke?" She smiled and replied, "No, this is business." Now her sewing machine sits in her office, not in a dark room, but beside her leather chair. And that same tack-tack-tack sound, it still echoes, but this time in a building she owns. The seamstress they once mocked is now their landlady. Amaka was a quiet, middle-aged woman who kept to herself. She lived alone in a room in a noisy compound where everyone talked too much and judged too quickly. She didn't have many visitors, didn't gossip, and sometimes lit candles and prayed at night. That was all it took for the neighbors to start calling her a witch. She's always alone. She doesn't go to church. She must be doing something dark. Soon, rumors turned into whispers, and whispers turned into hate. One day, after a little girl in the building fell sick, people pointed fingers at Amaka. "She's the reason!" they screamed. The landlord, under pressure from tenants, gave her a week to leave. No proof, no hearing, just fear and gossip. Amaka packed her things with dignity. She didn't fight, didn't argue. She left quietly, her face calm but her heart broken. No one helped her. Some even clapped when she left. But what they didn't know was that Amaka had been studying spirituality for years. Peace, healing, and self-growth. After leaving, she moved to another town, started a small online class, and began coaching people. Her videos went viral. People loved her gentle voice, her calm advice, her energy. Clients from around the world started booking sessions. Money flowed in. Amaka began to glow in peace and purpose. 3 years later, the landlord of that same compound got very sick. Medical bills piled up. He had no choice but to sell the building. No one wanted to buy such an old, gossipy place. But one buyer came forward, quiet, polite, and full of grace. It was Amaka. She didn't haggle. She paid full price without a word. When the paperwork was done, she visited the building. The same people who once insulted her stared in shock. Some tried to greet her nervously. Amaka simply smiled. Within a week, every room in the building had a fresh coat of paint and a gold nameplate above each door that read, "Property of Madame Amaka." She didn't increase the rent. She didn't evict anyone. She gave peace. They had called her a witch, but now she was their landlord and their lesson. They feared her silence. Now they respected her power. Afe never expected her worst day to become the beginning of her story. It started with a missed rent payment, just one. She had lost her job at the salon and was still trying to find work. She begged the caretaker for more time, but instead they gathered her clothes, her bags, and even her little food items and threw them all out, into the street, into the gutter. As her bras and dresses floated in dirty water, neighbours stood by watching. Some laughed, some took out their phones. Someone even shouted, "She doesn't even have a proper box." A boy uploaded a video online captioned, "When rent is due and you're broke." It went viral, thousands of views, thousands of comments. Everyone was calling her that poor girl. Eve didn't respond. She didn't defend herself. She just disappeared. But while the world forgot, Eve was working. She started selling thrift clothes online. Then she learned how to import cheap fashion items. Slowly, she built an Instagram shop. One viral reel, then another. Orders started coming. She invested smartly, lived simply, and saved quietly. 2 years later, she returned to that same street, but not as a tenant. The building that once threw her out was now up for sale. Eve walked in with her lawyer, paid in full, and signed the papers. No cameras, no noise, just her quiet victory. Then, she changed the name on the gate. In big silver letters, it now reads, Eve's Rise. And that viral video, she keeps a framed screenshot of it in her office. Not to feel pain, but to remember the moment they tried to break her and failed. Now when people pass by the building, they don't call her that poor girl. They call her owner.